If you're listening to this, there's a good chance you work within the real estate investing industry. There's another good chance that you would like to increase the sales of your products or services. Well, you're in the right place. United States Real Estate Investor is a platform you need to place your brand directly in front of your target audience. With our focused, growing audience of real estate investing beginners, enthusiasts, and seasoned professionals, you can continually reach our captivated viewers and listeners with ease. To learn more or to get started today, just visit UnitedStatesRealEstateInvestor.com/advertising. That's UnitedStatesRealEstateInvestor.com/advertising. Get ready to increase your brand awareness and your bottom line. Attract clients with content.
Universe. Media. Network. 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 Network.
Welcome to This Month in Real Estate Investing, where we help you navigate the news. I'm your host, James Brown, and in this episode, we'll be breaking down a variety of real estate investing news items, including war with Iran raises concerns for U.S. housing market, new FinCEN rule targets residential real estate transactions, and FBI busts $17.4 million mortgage fraud scheme targeting seniors. Don't forget, if you're watching live on YouTube, you can share your thoughts and post questions during the show. Also, if you're an investor looking to connect with investor-focused agents in your market, just email me for now at james@jamesbrownrealestate.com and we can hook you up with a good agent in your market. Okay, let's start the show. All right, our guests today are Tim Baldwin, Dr. Axel Meyerhofer, and Meg Epstein. You had your other on the screen, Obal? Is that how you said it? Obal. I knew I was going to screw it up. In that order, why don't you guys introduce yourselves, share your background in real estate investing, and the types of investing you focus on currently. So start with Tim.
Hey everybody, I'm Tim Baldwin. I'm an attorney in Florida, and our law firm handles primarily anything relating to property. We have a heavy emphasis on ownership interest and landlord interest, and we represent apartment companies, property management companies, real estate investors throughout the state of Florida.
Oh, fantastic. Cool. Dr. Axel.
Yeah, thank you. And thanks for having me. I'm the founder of Ideal Wealth Grower. And what we do is we help people to invest using turnkey investing in residential real estate, mainly with the goal of developing a passive income portfolio. I always say to reach the time freedom point, ultimately able to decide what do you want to do with your time. And we've been doing this since 2015.
Oh, very cool. All right, Meg.
I'm a real estate developer based in Nashville with a heavy track record in industrial and residential. And now we're heavily focused on our condo brand called The Modernist, which is basically turnkey investments in condo buildings that allow for passive income and, a fully managed experience for the investor. So they can own a place in our pipeline markets and passively own it and get rental income on it when they're not using it.
Very cool. And Dr. Axel, what market are you in, or markets?
Well, we're looking for high-performing locations. So one cluster that we have been serving is Idaho. Another one currently is in Ohio. The most active one we're using right now is in Alabama, but we also like max area there because, Alabama is kind of connecting to Tennessee and Georgia and so forth. So that area.
Okay, cool. All right. Well, thanks for being here, guys. Let's dive into the news from KTLA 5 Los Angeles. Los Angeles woman faces 24 years in prison for real estate fraud. She was filing fake liens against homeowners, blocking sales, and causing major financial damage. Prosecutors say the claims were completely fraudulent. In reading into this, I'll just kind of kick this off. So most of them were like mechanics liens, if people are familiar with that. So they were majority of those were mechanics liens. And then she did file one grant deed that could potentially transfer ownership to her. It just seems crazy that she would think that would work, right? Like it's got to go through a title company and all that. You'd think they would catch that. And then in the article, it wasn't explained how she would benefit from the mechanics liens, but doing a little research, I guess the play might have been, and you guys can jump in, maybe you understand this. The play would be like, she's basically kind of locked things up. So if somebody got a property under contract, they're going to have to clear that lien, and under a time crunch wanting to close, she might come forward and be like, hey, I'll let you out of this if you pay me 5, 10, 20 grand or something to make this go away, even though it was fraudulent. So I don't know, what do you guys think?
James, we've seen this at our law firm. These cases can be quite crazy. We're dealing with some now to this effect, where in some of these people, I'm not sure if people here have heard of sovereign citizens. Maybe you have, maybe you haven't, but they're people that operate in a very different world than the rest of us, and they will do a variety of things to lock up properties. It could be what we see here in this article. It could be sending a notice to tenant occupied properties saying that they own the property. It could be filing lawsuits against tenants who aren't even their tenants. And so we have had to defend these and prosecute these cases against these types of people. There are a variety of actions, of course, that can be filed to stop this. And you noted one, which is to remove the cloud on title, but there are other actions as well. And some of these people do this sort of as a profession. They are what we call in Florida vexatious litigants. So they sort of look for opportunities to file lawsuits against people to try and claim some kind of ownership in these properties. It's very, very interesting.
Well, that'll keep you busy.
Yeah, one thing maybe there's a component to look into, and I didn't see it in the article, but to look into what particular deals are basically being affected. There is, especially in the Los Angeles area, so our business is in San Diego, so we have some familiarity with that particular market. There are a lot of deals that are basically handled where everything is in a sense outsourced. Right? Yes, there is a seller, but the seller doesn't necessarily want to really appear in public or have it even known that there is a sale going on. So that's outsourced. The real estate agency is kind of outsourced. The buyer side might be outsourced if it's a high value deal. So ultimately, it can also be a scheme where if you keep the numbers relatively modest, like Tim was saying, if you say 20,000 or 50,000 and you're talking about a $10 million deal, there is probably a threshold to say, when would I actually go to the seller and say, hey, is this relevant in a deal like that, right? Like, it's kind of like almost like you're trying to stay under the radar. Like Tim said, the title is supposed to be cleared. So, when you have title insurance and you do the title search, these things pop up, but they're potentially small enough. You have to keep in mind it's totally, I wouldn't say normal for normal people, but in the area, it's not that unusual that there's a $10 million, $20 million, $35 million sale on a single family property, right? And so if you have a $20,000 or $30,000 even mechanics lien or something, it's so minor on first glance that somebody can skim off money in that way without ever having to work, because all the parties are basically third parties and not really that interested in rocking the boat or, blocking the deal or something like that. I would, based on the way it's reported, suspect it's more like that, to say, okay, can I find the level of lien that doesn't really make anybody bother than just paying it off?
Yeah, that Dr. Alex is right. A lot of these owners, they're looking at numbers, they're looking at spreadsheets, and so they're trying to work a deal. And so when they see something like this, and it could be minor, they may not think twice about just paying whatever the lien amount is, just so the deal can move through quickly. So that is a scheme. It's a fraudulent scheme. Sometimes it's more nefarious than this, meaning that the fraudulent actor is actually trying to do like a foreclosure action, for an example, on the lien. So it can become more complicated in that regard.
Yeah, we shouldn't forget one thing, James. Oftentimes it's on both ends. If you look at the spectrum of how long the property was owned, that this third-party activity happened. So I would say for my houses, I have a pretty good idea when I bought them that the title was clear and there was nothing done and there were no things done. And I would say most other people that have a modest portfolio on modest properties, that's probably true. But if you're an actor and you bought like a $10 million property and you had it for 5 years and now you want to sell it for 20 million, you don't even know if there was something, if the title search was done correctly, if any work that some house management company did on your property maybe triggered something. You just don't know, right? So that's a little bit of an aspect to consider. Like if the deal overall is all third party, that's what I wanted to point out, right? If it's all third party, the actual owner, both, the seller and the buyer, they're basically just signing the documents in a way. And even that, they may have a power of attorney to somebody, right? So it's a pure financial transaction. And the details that we normally encourage everybody to be aware of in the disclosures, they don't typically care about this stuff.
Yeah, good point.
I was going to add too, in Florida, there's a way, sometimes what you see is when you have a tenant occupied property, of course, the lease agreement can control some of this, but tenants may hire a contractor to do work, and then that contractor will then, put a lien on that property if the bill is not paid, and the landlord doesn't know about it. And so we have a statute here in Florida that the landlords can actually file a notice of lien prohibition that prevents a tenant from doing this, as well as to give these contractors notice that the tenants can't contract for this kind of work. So there are protections depending on your state laws, and so that can help to avoid that sort of scenario.
Yeah, that'd be good to have.
Well, and it kind of helps, obviously, the contractor, right? Tim is right. If you get in one of those mentions a contract for like a $250,000 renovation, it kind of makes sense if you're a small operator to say, I need to make sure that I get paid, and if not, that I have some title against it. So it's not automatically just because somebody puts a lien, it's fraudulent. In this case, it obviously was, because there most likely was never any work or any relationship at all.
Yeah.
Meg, you have any comments on that one?
I was just thinking, I'm typically buying like larger commercial properties, so we have a very formal title process that I don't deal with anything like that. But and then I'm selling new buildings, so it's a little different. But crazy.
Yeah. Cool. Let's jump to the next news item from Real Estate News. How will the war in Iran impact the U.S. housing market? Economists say higher oil prices and disrupted trade routes could push inflation higher and keep mortgage rates elevated, though a short conflict could limit the damage. There's a lot of easy for me to say. What do you guys make of this? I think there's a lot of components to this. I'll let you guys jump in.
Well, I would say it depends really on which aspects. Like if you, for example, look maybe as the first point through the lens of affordability. One thing, we have heard in the news, besides this particular statement or article, that, what is it called? The Secretary of War is looking for $200 or $300 billion extra to fund the war. So affordability is directly related to the Treasury, which is directly related to mortgage rates, which is directly related to affordability for anybody to purchase real estate. So that is one aspect. The other aspect is for us as investors, obviously, it keeps the interest level of mortgages high, the more debt is being piled on. And I would say the war is probably just accelerating it. It's already at an insane pace. But this notion we hear constantly, right? Every time the Federal Reserve is meeting, we hear, oh, will the rates go down and will that impact the real estate market? And I always say no, because the 10-year Treasury is really the anchor point. And with more and more debt, that is probably not going to go down anytime soon.
Yeah. Meg, Tim, thoughts?
I'm deferring to my other real estate guys here.
Yeah.
I think we have seen an impact, and it's really too bad because we've already faced so many headwinds between everything else, rising interest rates. I mean, just as a developer. So I've certainly seen an impact. We're pre-selling condos now. I'm very happy to be in the middle market. I think in the luxury upper market, we're seeing a lot of pause, and a lot of people want to hang on to liquidity and are just kind of waiting to see what happens. So, being in Nashville is great because we have a very dynamic economy, but we're also building a pipeline in other markets, and it's just, we just keep waiting for this sort of recession to stop, and then it's something else. So I'm hoping it's short-lived, and then people will be really ready to start deploying capital again, because it felt like we were starting to see that in February, and now this happens and people are kind of on pause again.
Yeah.
Particularly in the institutional markets.
Yeah. Well, we also have to keep in mind the other aspect, another lens to look at is inflation, right? I mean, yes, the article points to oil prices, but there's most likely inflationary impacts in many other places. Transport, for example, is impacted, right? Like certain routes that, yes, we always talk about 20% of the oil going through the Strait of Hormuz, and that's true, but it's not just oil. There's other ships going through that area as well. And overall, with the whole kind of uncertainty going on, oil is probably the poster child in a way. But otherwise, if you look at all the other things that need to be transported, that need to be rerouted, that impact different economies, I sometimes feel we look very much at our impacts, but think about how much stuff comes from other countries that we need for all kinds of things. I'm sure Meg is using certain things for construction, or her contractors use for construction. Well, that needs to be transported. In some cases, raw materials need to be turned into actually usable products. Those have to come, and all the countries in the world are impacted. If there's an oil issue, if there's a gas issue, like these recent bombings destroyed 20% of the gas infrastructure, like natural gas. Now in the US, we get it ourselves, but it impacts other countries that need it for any kind of high energy production processes and stuff. So I think there's a high likelihood that we will see more inflation than anybody predicted for 2026, because I think nobody had the war on the radar. And we were all hoping we're getting closer to 2% and the Fed could lower rates. And now we are closer to 3% and rising, right? Now, on the flip side, that also means for our tenants in our investment properties, they might have a harder time, to have money left before the month is over, right? And this can make a situation tricky. And it makes it tricky for us to see, are we going to get more delinquencies, more evictions, more that kind of stuff.
Yeah.
I'll just say most of the,
go for it.
With the clientele that we have who are investors, they haven't talked to me about the Iran conflict, but obviously in Florida, the hurricanes, we hear about that a lot. The insurance premiums is a really big topic that we hear about a lot, as well as, of course, the population growth in Florida is a big part of the demand. But as far as Iran, I'm certainly don't have a lot to say about that at this moment. But In Florida, hurricanes. That's sort of what we live in.
Yep. Yeah, I was gonna say, like, the economics of it is one factor, but the psychology of and the instability of having a war, like, that is a huge factor, right? Like, same with stocks, right? Stories can come out, and where people are in their heads can drastically change how they're investing, what they're buying, what they're selling, when, right? And it's the same with real estate. So headlines like this really make people spooked. So
Yeah, I think maybe I can, as somebody who's originally from Germany, give a little bit of an international perspective, because I have pretty tight connections to Europe and other places around the world. One of the things that, and I'm hesitant to make these kind of semi-political oriented statements, but there is obviously an impression. And I would say, in my own opinion, there is currently a growing impression that those world superpowers with the biggest military might and a history of kind of using it are taking over a little bit, like back to the old Cold War times, or even before, after World War II, where if you had the military and you didn't like something, you just move ahead. And so for the Europeans, they are extremely unsure of what this means for, like, allied relationships, political relationships, to the whole tariff situation. I know a couple of my friends in South America are, like, trying to think, okay, if anybody could be invaded or impacted like this, what does this mean for our economy, for our money, for our relationships, right? So it's not just between two sides like the US and Iran or Russia and Ukraine. It always spreads out further. And so what I've seen is, in the international community, that people start thinking more and more about a plan B. What if something even more dramatic happens? Where can I go? What can I do? And from a real estate investing perspective, this can also mean, okay, where would I even be allowed to go as an American or as a European? And how can I establish some sort of a foothold in those markets? And for anybody listening that is thinking those thoughts, it's best when you start preparing, if that's even an intention, while you can, and not to wait for the incident that triggers and everybody then suddenly wants to have a plan B.
it'll be interesting.
Yeah.
Well, other comments before we jump to the next article? All right. From Mortgage Professional America, real estate investors turn away from Florida. Sorry, Tim.
I think there's still plenty here, though, to be honest.
Yeah. This is the reasons, and as you stated, insurance, we all know that, HOA costs, and a rise in inventory. And investors are shifting towards the West Coast, apparently. So,
we've seen this. Again, the insurance costs are a big part of this. It mentions HOAs. This is interesting because we have seen an increase in HOAs passing restrictions on certain uses of these properties in these within these associations. So some of them completely, prohibiting vacation rentals, or we call them transient rentals under the legal term, as well as even with long-term rentals. It's becoming more, depending on where you are, becoming more stricter in that regard. So that can be a bit of a problem for investors who are looking, especially if you're looking for higher end properties to invest in, to see these hurdles. I've definitely have seen our clients discuss this. And then there's another one here. What was the other one? Not sure. I think that was it. But yeah, it's certainly, well, I mean, the other thing that people don't talk about a lot is how the landlord-tenant laws are. So thankfully in Florida, we have good laws that don't allow most eviction cases to drag on and on. I have some investors who invest in Florida as well as other states, and some of the deterrents that they have with some of our neighboring states is just not good landlord-tenant laws. And so they avoid those states. And that's something that, interestingly enough, we don't actually see articles written about that very often, but that's a real tangible thing, because if you can't turn over those properties very quickly, then you're losing that money month after month.
Yeah.
I still think Florida has a lot of it seems like every time we think people are moving away from it, like when Mondavi got elected in New York, like it just seemed like people were like, okay, no, now we're going back to Florida. Like I have a lot of investor clients in New York, and it just seems like, and I know they just passed in the House legislation about reducing property taxes. So I think it really just depends on the submarkets of Florida. And Tim, to your point, like Miami, I don't know how it's absorbed so much product and continues to. It's definitely slowed down from the prime, but there's still a lot of absorption. So I think it does depend on what market you're in specifically and what type of newer, like if it's newer inventory, I think it's still very much in demand. And we've seen that. And we've actually had to, like we have several projects coming up, but like St. Pete is a market where they don't allow people to rent out for less than 30 days. And so we would have to build our buildings under a hotel license to kind of give people that flexibility, because that's what people want. They want to be able to spend part-time in Florida. And so I think it really just depends on the kind of asset it is, but particularly in the higher end, I think the demand is still very much there, and we see a lot of absorption. At least,
and there's a lot of that. Sorry, Meg. There's a lot of acquisitions that go on too. When you have property management companies who aren't really executing very well and performing very well, these properties get to be in distress. And so some of the larger companies, acquire these properties. And so, the investors may shrink, but the portfolios grow for some of these larger investors. Some of my larger investment clients are growing year over year, and adding more and more portfolios. When you look at the numbers in Florida, county to county, eviction rates are going up every year substantially, showing a tremendous increase in our rental population. So it's still moving quite well.
We have all the condo assessments that went in, and that's kind of my comment on the older product in Florida. But Tim's going to be really busy, I think, for a long time. But I think another big issue with Florida is because there's so many more condos. Just as a condo developer, I know this, but the HOAs are a big problem. I've seen, I own a condo in Florida, and I'm trying to sell it now because it really can dictate how things are operated. And that's one thing that we've worked around in our buildings, is we keep control of the HOA, because I think, there's a lot that the wrong HOA or the wrong leadership can really make your investment not valuable. So we've seen
HOAs have a lot of power in Florida. They do things that, especially from the property management side of this, when you have an HOA that's very difficult to work with, you're really ticking off both the tenant and the property manager, because you have an HOA that's basically stepping in and kind of dictating how the relationship works. They issue these fines that the owners are livid, about this. And so some of them just say, well, it's not worth managing a property in this condo, or this HOA, and they sell and they get out of it. So it can definitely be a problem.
Yeah, I think there's another aspect also to consider when there's a headline like that. It doesn't really spell out what is the intention of the investor and which investors are actually leaving. There is, like Meg said, a lot of investors originally came to Florida, especially to Southern Florida, with the goal of appreciation for their investment. To say, I get in, I don't know, at 300 or 400,000, my goal is to get out at 500 or 600 in 3 years from now. So that's a clear appreciation intention. For my clients, for example, where we're looking for cash flow, there were times when you could actually invest in Florida and have cash flow plus appreciation, in both in modesty. Now, most of these deals that Tim and Meg mentioned, you can't figure out any kind of cash flow anymore. So anybody who is really interested in cash flow is really hurting and leaving as fast as possible, especially like Meg said with the assessments. I don't know if you remember, James, but there were these cases where this one building basically collapsed and it was pulled back to, construction mistakes and maintenance mistakes. And obviously, when you have a state with that much high percentage, almost everywhere you have HOAs, they're all afraid that something could be found and it could be in some way their fault. So that these assessments that Meg mentioned lead to extremely additional cost on the property itself that you as a co-owner, like in a 50-unit condo, you have no chance to avoid. You're basically losing your property if you're not going along, plus high insurance, plus limited level. I mean, when you look at what the rents are, I have clients who have like a few condos with rents at $4,500 and $5,000 on basically a one-bedroom condo or stuff like that, right? And when you think that through, yes, this all works out when money is flush, but it's not always the case. I think the market is a little bit giving a deceiving indication because the influx of people is for people who want to have a residence in Florida. And that a property tax law is also if you become a resident, if it's owner occupied, not when it's an investment property. So all these things are basically creating a little bit of an image of especially cash flow investors or investors who not exclusively look for appreciation long term. It's not comparatively as good a place as, like, for example, Nashville.
Yeah.
Yeah. Do you think, Tim, that the bill will be passed in the Senate with the property tax reduction? That would probably help significantly.
I haven't put my thumb on that to see or made contacts in Tallahassee to get a gauge of that. I think it. My guess is it's going to have wide support, but I'm uncertain at this point.
Well, the way I read it, Tim, and maybe being local, you know it better, but the way I read it, it doesn't help investors. The way I read it, it says, if you're buying a condo and you're moving into it, then you could have, under certain circumstances, no or very limited property tax. But if you're an investor, I didn't see that it gives any relief for investors.
Yeah, it may not. I think it's intended to help homeowners homestead.
Only for primary residences. Yeah.
Yeah. That we have had some statutory changes that have relieved some tax burdens on investors on the commercial side. So some of our taxes were removed for commercial properties, which has been good on the commercial front.
Yeah, I mean, one of the things, I guess, that anybody listening to our show and not being that familiar, if you are in a state like Florida or Texas where there is no state income tax, you have to ask yourself, where is money going to come from to run everything? Yes, if you have successful businesses that pay basically that way, but the pretty much only other way is property tax if you don't have a state income or state sales tax or stuff, right? So I think it is understandable that they're trying to, on the one hand, help, but not basically go to zero for everybody, because ultimately any state has to somehow be able to operate and still do infrastructure investments and stuff like that.
Yeah.
Let's jump to the next one. And we could have an entire podcast weekly talking about HOAs, right?
Yeah. The good and the bad.
Oh my goodness. Yes.
I literally I figured out a way with like a really awesome legal team, but we keep control of our HOAs by owning all of our amenity spaces now, just because we still have members of our HOA, but we ultimately keep control mainly just for like maintenance issues and just this sort of paralysis that happens when something needs to be done. But it's not my favorite. It's like the least favorite part of my job, but
yeah.
That's why I basically just, not to beleaguer the point too much, but that's why I decided and preach it basically to our clients that we stay maximum 4 doors, right? So we really have control, that we don't really have any kind of force to do HOA. I don't want to say that a larger multifamily unit automatically requires an HOA. But on the other hand, it's not purely a property management task either, right? So that has to be somewhat considered. I feel it's important for any investor to ask yourself, how much control do you want to have? And investments in properties with HOAs, maybe MEC has found a way to make it somewhat acceptable or better. But every single time that I've seen investors coming to me and say, I need to get out of this, I want a 1031 into something where I have control, that's typically the thing, that they have properties and they have no rights.
Yeah, that's only because I'm developing the entire building. That's the only reason I can do it. But I'm in the same situation. I have a condo in Florida and I want to sell because I don't have enough control over what they're doing. But
and it's not just Florida. Meg is right? Like, I mean, I started out and still live in California, and started out investing in California as well. And it was the same thing. And what can even happen, I don't know about Florida, Tim would know, but in California, you might buy something and then somebody with enough power and enough money decides that the whole thing, the whole neighborhood or so, is now becoming part of an investment or some part of a fund or something like that. And suddenly you have an HOA. And even if you vote against it, you're still caught, right? Like, so that can happen in these larger apartment complex setups.
Yeah, we've seen that where HOAs have stripped the right or the privilege, whatever you want to call it, of renting out, again, mentioning the short term or the vacation, but even the controls over the long term. So if you bought that property in that HOA with the understanding or the assumption that you could rent these without really much restriction, it can just change. It could change overnight.
Yeah, there's also one other thing. I'm really have a great relationship with an organization called PadSplit, and they started in Florida. And the idea is basically to say, okay, there are people who just get into the job market out of high school. Not everybody has an academic degree. And for them, it's really hard to get their own place. And Tim, again, you can confirm or say I'm not right, but most places nowadays want 3 months rent. Well, if you just started a job working at Macy's or something like that, 3 months rent upfront as a security deposit is really hard to do. So PadSplit came up with an idea where you're basically initially renting like a bedroom and a bathroom in a house, and then you can work your way up with your credit score, your rental history, your eviction history, and so forth, so that you ultimately save a little bit from your income to be ultimately able to get your own apartment complex. But HOAs would be the first to say, no, that's not allowed. In a condo with 3 bedrooms, 3 baths, you cannot rent it individually to 3 different parties.
Yeah, you're talking room leases.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's not just,
I hate to keep belaboring this point, but I've dealt with this with our home in Florida, and then we had a condo in downtown Nashville, and we moved to the lake when we started having kids, which is like 40 minutes away, and we just didn't use it. I couldn't even get a year-long renter in my condo building. That was a Conrad Hilton condo building. And there was I didn't realize that, which is ridiculous because I'm a real estate developer, but I didn't realize I couldn't rent it out because they just didn't give me the leases. But this is why in our brand, you can rent out for 365 days or 1 or 2 days. You can live there primarily and then just rent it out, and it's all taken care of for you, because I really tried to address this problem. I think more and more people want to be able to defray their cost of ownership as things have gotten so unaffordable. So
I will say, to Dr. Alex's point, that actually the entry point is actually easier in Florida than it has been for a number of years. There are different types of insurance programs that can help tenants avoid having to pay a security deposit. There are a lot of concessions being offered. It used to be primarily for apartments, but now you see single family property managers doing this as well, because the competition has gotten so steep in Florida. I mean, largely because of the number of apartments that they're building. And so you have to give a lot of concessions. And so there are various opportunities now that help to lower the cost of entry into the particular unit that you would like to rent. So it's gotten better in that regard.
Yeah, I find it actually kind of funny. And James, I don't know what you say about it, but it feels like in investing markets, real estate not being excluded from it, is there's always this screw that gets turned and turned and turned until it gets turned a little too far. And then something has to happen, right? Like concessions on rentals, or if you look at places in Texas, I know there's Austin, for example, got massively overbuilt and they had to give huge concessions to be able to actually rent their places. And then the screw is turned back a little bit and we get into a normalized market again. So that's, I think, one of the lessons for anybody listening or watching, to say, okay, where are we in the cycle? Not just in the big picture for the whole United States or for a particular type of investing, but really also locally to where you're actually intending to go.
So I don't know if I mentioned I'm in Denver, and I've been working with Pad Split since they came. They came and spoke at our cash flow club that I run here locally, and so we're getting this market up and going. They picked Denver as like their, I think, 21st market because of affordability. We've got such high prices, rents are high, so we're solving a need. And one of the nice things is our governor passed a statewide law saying that there was no limit to how many unrelated people live in a home. And I think we're one of 3 states that have that statewide law. But back to the HOAs can layer their rules over that. And so if we're buying a property for co-living, we just don't buy it in an HOA, or at least we avoid it. I always recommend to my clients, don't buy it in an HOA, because even if it's $20 a month or whatever, that the rules could change. They could layer on, some rules and screw your whole investment. But I love that.
I will say, I'm sorry, James.
I was just going to say that, with that statewide law, it's going the right direction. Like, they're trying to solve affordability in this state, where Airbnb, short-term rentals, is going the opposite way, or it's more and more and more regulated and more competition. So I'm like, well, let's go with what's working, and it's not going to be such an uphill battle. So go for it, Tim.
Yeah. So a couple of things. One is one of the things that a lot of the investors that we talk with or clients, they like the fact that in Florida, we have a statute within our Landlord Tenant Act that prevents local governments from changing anything about the statute. So they cannot add, they cannot take away from the Landlord Tenant Act, which gives the landlords, the investors, a lot of predictability and a lot of stability as how these rentals are operated. So that's one thing that investors, I think, should be, or at least consider whether local governments have control and what, of course, those look like, because that can vary quite differently. The other thing is, the HOA situation can be sort of case by case, because obviously you can look at the rules. They could change. You could look at the rules and see if they're friendly or not. But the other thing is, a lot of these HOAs are basically defunct, so they haven't kept up with your annual reports. They're dissolved either by the state, because they have not kept up with their required filings. And so while it may be in an HOA, it's really effectively not, because they have not done what they're supposed to do.
Gotcha. Oh, I was going to also mention, so we're putting together a co-living agent accelerator. So for any real estate agents in a market where they're doing co-living, you want to learn how to do that, or you're already doing it and want to join our referral network, reach out, and I can share that when the training comes out. It should be out pretty soon. Or if you just, I mentioned, if you're an investor looking for an agent that specializes in investing or specifically co-living, we can hook you up. So anything else on this article before we go to the next one? I think we got off on some good tangents, right?
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. All right. Well, from Yahoo Finance, is the housing market going to crash again? Here's what experts think. Gosh, I'll let you guys take this one. I mean, I've got comments on it, but anybody want to jump in?
My comment would be, when did it crash last? Right? Like, in a sense, to me, these kind of titles are almost purely clickbait.
Yeah.
Right. I mean, if you make that such a claim, at least I think it would be fair to say, okay, like when? Right? Like, when did it really crash lately? Or are we going all the way back to 2008? Is that what we're talking about? Then they really don't know what has all changed and how much more solid all the different variables that make the real estate market nowadays, how different and how much more solid it is than it was if they refer to that crash. I'm not aware of any other crash before that.
Yep.
Since that,
luckily there's guardrails now, at least on the lending side, right? And in the article,
also, I mean, if you look at the financing side, for example, which was really the big trigger, the rules don't allow it anymore. The banks are way too scared. The interest rates are way too high. The qualification criteria, that's actually one of the things that I find with our clients. How much the dynamic, I don't know if Meg has a comment to that, but I remember in around 21, 22, I got an offer from one of our turnkey providers attached with a little note that said, I need an answer in 72 hours, whether we go under contract or not. Now, I know this was a little bit crazy times. Now, if I look, and this has been going on for about the last year and a half, is I'm asking, okay, a client of mine is interested in this particular property, and they say, well, take your time and make sure that the client has financing approved or pre-approved, and then we can go to contract, right? So there's kind of, or has developed an aspect to say, well, we know how hard it is, even for people with great credit scores and stuff like that, to get funding, even if they are investors and not looking for a primary residence and stuff like that, so that they basically say, yeah, we're happy to sell you the thing, but only if we know that you really can get the mortgage. That shows a little bit how the market has changed, right? The expectations are not so much, at least in the markets I'm operating in, to appreciation, which is nice for me because we're working for cash flow, right? So, but that also means it's gotten much harder. And I don't know, Meg, maybe in Tennessee, it's different right now, but it's gotten really hard to find cash flowing properties.
Yes, where interest rates are, it's very hard to find anything cash flowing. I think it really, again, I'm always so sub-market specific or asset class specific, because I think in housing, like generally, we still don't have enough homes in the US in terms of, and so like, where your supply metrics are. I've always focused on condos in the Southeast because there's just not a lot of them. It's not like other markets in, primary markets where there's a lot of condos. I mean, in Nashville, when I got here, there would be, 40 tower cranes in the sky and maybe one was a condo building. So that was kind of like why I focused on it. So I really just look at fundamental supply and demand, economics when looking for projects or markets. And I just don't think, to Axel's point, like there's just not, it's not any crazy sort of lending environment, and people are being prudent, and you can afford to buy what you're buying if it's happening. It's just a much lower transaction volume now. I wouldn't say, but the values have to be maintained because of how expensive it is to operate and where interest rates are. So I don't think we're I think we're at the tail end, hopefully, once we can get past this war of a housing slowdown.
Yeah, I would actually go as far as saying if a few core variables are settled in the right direction, and I'm happy to say what I mean by that, it is more like what Barbara Cochran said about 2 years ago, that if the interest to change or interest to move can get released, we will probably see a crazy upturn rather than a crash. And what I mean by that, one variable obviously is interest rates. A lot of people are sitting in properties with something like 3%, 3.5%, 4%, even 4.5%. And if they even were just to say, I want to change location, it doesn't have to be much bigger. Their monthly payment can easily almost double, right? Just because of interest. If they, and it's interest obviously, and the property being probably a little bit more expensive than the one that they're in right now. But even if they could sell for a good gain and then move into something else, the monthly payment would be higher. And people know this, let alone if you want something bigger. So a lot of people, I would say millions of people, are stuck in the properties that they purchased in 2020, 21, and they're happy about the equity, but they can't really do anything with it. The other number that I would like to just sprinkle in here to Mac's point is the United States is very interesting in comparison to most other developed countries around the world, because it's the only one that I'm aware of that has population growth between 500 and 700,000 people per year. And I'm not talking about immigrants or stuff like that. It's just population growth in the natural, organic way. So if you think back at how long have construction businesses, and Mac can talk to this much better, I guess, than I can, but I know that for years and years and years, contracting companies have been hesitant to make multi-million-dollar deals. First, because the money is expensive, permitting is tricky, access to the supply is tricky, rent levels are kind of not really increasing very much, so the numbers may not work out. So that has no impact on, I would say, the 5 million people since the last building boom that have basically become part of the population. And what that means is you don't see prices go down or the market crash when every year 500,000 new people are looking for a place to stay. And not all of them, like we always jokingly say, they're all living at home with their parents. I don't think so, right? At least they don't want to. So, so ultimately, if you do this for long enough, and I'm not saying we're not building anything new, but we also have to acknowledge that some of the older inventory is going away. So I know for a fact we're not building enough to replace the population growth, let alone any kind of step up that people would want.
Yeah. I noticed in the article it said inventory currently is below a balanced market at 3.7 months. In 2008, it was 13 months.
Yeah, but James, that's a false narrative, because that is inventory based on how many properties are actually for sale, right? So they're basically calculating, okay, what is the average volume of sales and how much is available in the market on Zillow or something like that.
Sure.
What it doesn't look at is how many people, and it's really, I wouldn't know how you really measure that unless you ask everybody in the census or so, how many people would want to move into their own apartment, into their own house, into their own condo or stuff. That number is probably massive and pretty much unknown. And they all can't because they can't afford it.
Right. Yeah. And it doesn't break out how much inventory is in condos that are affordable for a first-time home buyer versus, a 5-bedroom single-family house that they can't even afford. Those inventory levels would be probably
right, but it's also true for tenants, right? Like when we look as investors at the situation, yes, there are probably a bunch of people that are living with their parents. There are a bunch of people who would like to form a family and they're living with their partner in a tiny little place and would like to move up. There are people who have actually grown their family and would like to move into a house. And so it's a cascade, or you could say a waterfall that is not happening, because everything feels like it's locked down and not enough new inventory that's affordable is just making it worse, so to speak.
Yeah, I definitely don't think there's anywhere near enough inventory. There's been such a focus the last decade from institutional investors on the for rent space, that being in housing and in multifamily, that the inventory to buy both on the condo and for sale side is just not there. It's just not there. So, and then you couple that with the lack of transactions, like you were saying, that just make it, there's just not that many options, which is really too bad, because I can say this because I'm in Nashville and we have one of the most oversupplied multifamily markets in the country because there's been so much institutional capital entering it. And as a developer, it's always been way harder for me to fund a condo building, even though I make 3 to 4 times more profit than a multifamily building, because every, big, large checks, people that write $25 million checks want to deploy into multifamily. Right now in Nashville, there's still people breaking ground on multifamily. We're giving 4 months concessions. And people are still breaking ground. They're probably building to a 5 cap maybe, and they're still breaking ground in Nashville just because pension funds and these type of investors want for rent, and it just doesn't allow for enough supply and for sale. And to their point, I mean, Nashville, you're still buying for a below 5 cap for an apartment, for an institutional apartment building. So I don't get, I certainly don't get it, but I don't think especially on the for sale side, we're anywhere near an oversupply problem.
Yeah, we shouldn't forget, Antonio put in there 121,000 houses sitting empty. A lot of the construction industry that I'm aware of, they ran the numbers and looked at who is actually our clientele, who can actually afford to buy a new home. And they all drifted towards the upper end of the market. Right? If you have a really high income, double income or stuff like that, then the assumption is, okay, you're making 10, 12, 15 grand a month together, and therefore you can afford 5, 6, 7 grand or 5 or 6 or whatever, 50% or close to it is actually for the mortgage, right? To be even able to qualify. But what I was talking about is the demand in the area where your monthly payment is maybe $1,500 or $2,500 or something like that. That inventory, at least on the new build, I'm not aware that exists anymore. The lowest that I see in new builds right now is about in the 300 to 350 area for a single family home, right? But then if you calculate it, you're above 2,500 monthly payment.
Yeah. Well, hey guys,
exactly. Like Antonio just said, most leaning towards luxury buildings. Exactly. But that doesn't help the broader market where the people sitting at home and getting on the nerves of their parents.
Exactly. Well, hey guys, let's take a break and learn from one of our partners.
If you are serious about real estate and tired of guessing, you need to know about Real Expert Talks. This is where real questions meet real experts. As a member, you get direct one-on-one access to experienced real estate professionals. No courses, no fluff. Just focused video calls where you ask your question, get the answer, and move forward fast. 5 minutes, 15, or a full deep dive. You choose. One conversation can save you months of mistakes. And if you're an expert, this platform was built for you. Real Expert Talks lets you monetize what you already know. Set your own rates, control your schedule, get paid to give advice, build your authority, and expand your reach without chasing clients or selling anything extra. No middlemen, no noise, just expertise, access, and action. If you want answers, sign up as a member. If you have answers, sign up as an expert. Go to Real Expert Talks and turn knowledge into momentum. RealExpertTalks.com.
Okay, RealExpertTalks.com. Check it out. All right, back to the news from WDRB Louisville. Victims lose thousands in rental scams as Kentucky lawmakers push for tougher punishments. Rental scams are costing victims thousands as fraudsters copy listings and collect deposits. Lawmakers are trying to increase penalties, but enforcement remains tough. Tim, do you have any comments on that?
Yeah, no, we see this, and sometimes we have to unfortunately remove people who are in the properties when they don't have an agreement with the owner. Sometimes that turns into criminal action that the state brings against the fraudsters. But these people who have lost the money that they've paid to who they thought was the owner is a real problem, or can be a real problem. I know with a lot of our clients who are professional real estate companies, they try to take those steps to ensure that their listing cannot be copied in a way that appears to be legitimate. So that they have certain embedding codes and such within their photos and their links and these types of things that help to prevent fraud. But you can't prevent all of it. And the other thing as well, I would mention a couple different things. One is we see this on the flip side of it, to where renters, or I say they propose themselves as being renters, will, let's say, book a night at a vacation rental, and they will use their credit card, and then they will get the code to access the property, and then they'll cancel the credit card, and then they'll move into that property and just squat there. They'll squat there until they get removed. So there's another side of this as well that we see from time to time.
Yeah. One thing I can say is, like I said, our investing market and our investing clientele, we are staying in the relatively smaller, like anything single family, duplex, triplex, fourplex. And I think this is a really good example of how important professional property management is. I always say, you want to check in with your property management company once a month for like half an hour to check. But it also, if they're on top of things, if they're really managing their portfolio properly, this is almost impossible to pull off. Like in our case, our property management companies we work with do 3 months and 6 months checks. They know of every rent payment. They know of every little thing that happens with the property. And, I don't necessarily see this other than the way that Tim just mentioned it. But you need, as for any investor, I think the message is you need to stay involved between you as the owner, property management, and the tenant. It needs to be a good relationship, and then this is probably harder to pull off.
Yeah. It's interesting to see the different approaches that the county sheriff's office or the police departments will, how they approach these scenarios. Certainly they can prove fraud in a criminal statute. Like in Florida, we do have theft by fraud or fraud in the inducement or these misrepresentation, these types of things. But sometimes the county sheriff or maybe the police department may look at this and not quite see a criminal action. So they'll just tell you this is a civil issue, especially whenever you have a dispute between someone who's there in the property and the owner of the property. So they kind of defer you to file an action in civil court. There's all kinds of scenarios. It's interesting. I'm kind of go off on the tangent here, James, if that's okay.
Go for it.
But we see other situations where, and this is kind of crude, but and they're typically women who will use rental properties as a hosting site, sort of, if you want to call it a hosting site of fetish porn, and damaging property and that sort of thing. We actually have a client right now that's undergoing that unfortunate scenario. So there's all of these things that can happen to property owners. And so I think, as Dr. Alex noted, and I completely agree, is having professional management, because you have to keep as tight of controls on this as possible. That's knowing who's in your property, and regular inspections, having all of the technological advances that help you prevent fraudsters from getting into your property and doing damage.
Yeah, exactly. One of the things that I can recommend, and again, this is for the scale of properties that we have, we recommend for all our owners, in conjunction with property management, to use the new locks that you have that basically change the lock code every hour or every 90 minutes or something like that. And then obviously, as the tenant, you have an app that is specific for you, and you have to basically put in your PIN, and then it gives you the latest code, and you get in or out. You can even enhance that with cameras.
Yep.
I don't want to go as far as like the Chinese with face recognition and stuff like that, but technically these things are possible nowadays. The thing, and I'm very, very happy that we have a lawyer in the team today. To me, honestly, and this might sound really harsh, but a lot of these things should have criminal consequences. And I'm very sure if they had criminal consequences, then you could limit. Yes, there would still be a risk to the most egregious offenders operating on a larger scale. But in the normal way of things, if these kind of things were taken from civil to criminal, right? Like you're basically either occupying or damaging somebody's property. And we have always, at least in my recollection, said property rights are one of the highest rights in civil society, in Western democratic societies, and almost exclusively keeping them under civil law. This is the same thing like in some states where, like California, it takes you more than a year to get somebody out. And if there are not really people that have money or income, you incur extreme losses, and you can't even say, okay, when they're finally caught, when they're finally out, then at least they go to jail. And I'm sure if they knew ultimately they go to jail, they wouldn't even try. But the fact that they get a little doo-doo, a slap on the hand, and then they move on and harass the next owner, that's just not right. I mean, I know this is maybe sounds a little bit extreme, but through the lens of me as an investor and all my client investors, we feel extremely frustrated. I don't know if this Bill 264 is really putting down the hammer a little bit more. It's not just catching people. It's a matter of, is the punishment right to the crime? And I say deliberately crime. And I don't know, Tim, if this is too extreme, but I wish that legislations in different locations would do this. The other thing, and I don't know, James maybe or somebody here knows, I still don't understand why we don't have a national register for evictions. And how is it? Like I mentioned, you asked me in the beginning, James, where are our investment clusters? One is in Idaho, but right at the border to Illinois. And we had literally cases in my own portfolio where somebody basically rented a property in Davenport and then moved over to Rock Island, which is literally 3 miles over the river. And they were evicted in one and could get a rental agreement in the next one, no problem. That is, and technology is no hindrance or anything like that. It's really an issue for legislative treatment. That's not happening. Yes, every state has to be free and be a republic and all that cool stuff. But when it comes to people deliberately defrauding those who want to provide nice living space, that's my intention. I'm sure that's Mac's intentions, yours, James. Tim is helping people to follow that intention. And the government is obviously interested with that intention. Otherwise, they wouldn't give us depreciation and write-offs and all that kind of stuff. But when people start mistreating property, the punishment should be clear, and you shouldn't be able to escape over state lines.
Yeah, I think it boils down to, because most states, I would probably say all states have some sort of theft or criminal statute regarding theft by fraud or deception, these types of things. But again, the local police enforcement is going to have a large part to do with that. They could be overworked. They could be understaffed. The dockets could be cleared up or clogged up. And so they're trying not to add to that. They're trying to put some of this burden on the landlords to try and just resolve this if they don't feel like it's serious enough. And so the local county or city has a tremendous amount of authority in that regard. And the other thing too, I would say is when you look at even the statutes regarding removing people, I mentioned this earlier about having good state laws that don't really prolong the eviction process unreasonably. I mean, in Florida, we typically get a judgment against a tenant to remove them sometimes as soon as 15 days after we filed. Now, that doesn't happen in every county. They kind of vary a little bit based on the speed of how they operate in those counties. But 30 days we can get someone out. But you hear stories like in California, as Dr. Alex has said, is it could take months. And then same goes with the squatters. In Florida, we just passed a new law that allows the sheriff's office to remove squatters from the property if they cannot show that there's a legitimate lease agreement in place or that they have some sort of ownership interest. And so that's been a tremendous way for owners to get out people like this to prevent the legal delays and costs that go along with that.
Any other comments on that one? All right, thanks, guys. From the state, the wealthy are buying second homes in this South Carolina city more than most others in U.S., Forbes said. We're talking about Charleston. People buying second homes there, driven by lifestyle and flexibility. I don't know anything about that market.
I do. It's a great market because it's so they're so anti-built there. It's so hard to do anything, and it's literally an island. So that's been a great market for. I mean, it's in we have a project in the plans there for our condo product that you can rent out on a group travel basis, or own a condo and rent it out. There were very, very heavy restrictions for that. So we have to do it likely under a hotel license, but I think it's an incredible market. The weather's great. It's beautiful, and it's very supply constrained, and it's very hard to build, that's the biggest issue we've dealt with in Nashville, is that it was so easy to build for so long. I used to be able to identify a site and build something in 6 months, like break ground in 6 months on a big, huge project. But it's a process, which, is good and bad, but in terms of it being a good investment market, I think it's still there just because of how desirable it is. And there's been a huge influx, just like other Southeastern cities, from people from like Chicago, New York, California.
Yeah. I could see, like, if it's challenging to build, then you maybe have less competition, right? Is the point of that?
For my product, you mean?
Yeah, like if it's harder to get it done, get it built, less people are going to build the same thing, and so there's more opportunity.
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah. One thing I find oftentimes interesting in these kind of cases or these kind of claims is the time horizon that people either have or don't, right? If you look at the geography, I always jokingly say either they have to travel to the Netherlands and get some insights on how to keep this thing afloat, or they're really looking at some serious trouble, not in a year or two, but if you say, okay, why am I investing or even new build real estate? For the vast majority of people, it's not just for a 3-year, 5-year, or 7-year thing, even though they may move in and out within average 7 years. But to build something, right, fundamentally, you have a longer time horizon. And I don't know, I mean, there could be storms, as we have seen, especially this year. A lot of storms were much more intense. Even last year, I think Tim alluded to that, more intense. It's not so much the frequency, but the intensity that seems to be going up. If I look at that geography, I personally would be probably a little scared, and not because where it is or how high or low above sea level it is, but that there hasn't really been done anything significant to protect it, right? And so, yeah, I don't know if it's just because it's a good deal short term and people are willing to do it. I don't know, but to me, this looks kind of scary.
Article also said there's some similar demand in Salt Lake City, Naples, Pompano Beach, and Scottsdale.
Yeah, well, in Salt Lake City, at least you're not going to be inundated with seawater.
Nope. Not anytime soon.
Yeah. Well, but the idea, I mean, fundamentally, the idea, you remember I mentioned that people are kind of thinking about plan B or a second option or stuff like that. And it doesn't always have to be out of country. It could also be just a different location. Or you might say, okay, I see it, like I'm a baby boomer, I can definitely see. And when I talk to my daughter, she says, okay, I wish other people would have started, when I taught her and told her to get started, because you have a much longer time horizon to say, okay, well, if I get into a second home and I can slowly afford it, maybe even have it rented or stuff and get it paid off. So ultimately, I want to live in a nice location at a beach, if the beach is still there at the time. Right, so that's the thing. Or politically, you might say, okay, like Meg mentioned Mandani, right? Like if you ultimately decide, maybe I don't like this socialist stuff so much, I want to go somewhere where it's a little different. Those kind of thoughts for second home make sense. I'm just saying that particular location would scare me a little.
Yeah. Okay. Next article, the National Law Review. New reporting requirement under FinCEN's residential real estate rule is in effect as of March 1st of this year. It's requiring reporting for ownership and fighting money laundering. That's where maybe Tim, you can jump in and describe how people would launder money in situations like that, if you've run into that.
I was a prosecutor starting out in my career and been in real estate fields of law for all these years. I have not really dealt with this money laundering scenario. Now, you do see individuals who committing fraud on title and some of these things we talked about before, but not to the extent of what we're talking about, I think, with this article.
Yeah.
Well, one thing I can maybe shine a little bit of light on it. If you think about the structural aspect of it, if you were for a moment to assume somebody got money in a fraudulent way through drugs or some criminal deals or stuff like that, the question becomes, how can I clean it? And I mean, not in a washing machine, but from a legal perspective. So creating an LLC, let the LLC basically purchase real estate and then sell the real estate and get basically clean money out of it is a way of money laundering, especially on an international scale, right? Because it's not so clear that you really have to prove to the nth degree where you actually originally got the money for most deals. And Tim and Meg are probably even, and you as well, James, for most deals, if you can show that the money has been sitting in some sort of a savings account or a CD or something like that for 6 to 9 months, and then you use it, I've not seen that anybody said, where did this money came from originally?
Right. Yeah, and to clarify, this is for cash deals only. But residential real estate transfers in entities and trusts. So you got those entities, those trusts that create that anonymity. And then, like you were saying, cash, this dirty cash money, all of a sudden now you've cleaned it up.
Well, the dirty part is when you initially buy it and then you sell it for cash, and then the money that you receive as a seller is suddenly clean and you have all the documentation and everything, right? Yeah. So that's at least one aspect to consider. Okay, you form an LLC that costs you $300 to create a new LLC somewhere in Wyoming, and then you say this LLC is seeded with money. The bank is typically not going to ask you a lot of questions where the money came from that you sent to the bank account, and then you take that money and buy real estate. It's still dirty at that point, but when you then sell the real estate, it's clean. It's like washing it in a washing machine.
Yeah. Hence laundering, right?
Exactly.
Hey, and I think where there's pushback from investors is they're like, oh, well, we've set up these trusts for anonymity, but my understanding is that it's not like this breaks the anonymity. Like if somebody slips and falls and sues you, they're not going to find you, but the government and whoever's managing this transaction, they know who's behind the trust, but it's not like public knowledge, is my understanding.
Right, and the other aspect of it is, and I obviously don't know the statute, this is legal stuff, like Tim knows this stuff, but the one of the things is, how do companies, not just companies for the purpose of buying and selling real estate, but companies in general, where is the money coming from? And it is currently, has been currently relatively easy to form a straight out LLC or an S Corp, open a business bank account and just send money, right? And so if it comes international, there are some money laundering laws in place where you have to trace back a little more. But even that is not too strict. And like I mentioned, I have European clients who invest in real estate in the United States, and they can show, where the money has originally been pulled from, and that's all that's needed, right? So I think there's potentially a need for a little higher burden on the lenders and on the banking system. The LLC and the trust is just a legal instrument, if I may say so, Tim. I hope you agree.
Yeah. The I didn't read the specifics of the article, but disclosing the ownership, you can find out who owners are. I mean, especially if there's ever any litigation, you're going to find out who the beneficiaries are of a trust. You're going to find out who the trustors are. There's no way of completely hiding this information. So, I mean, I can understand from just a transactional standpoint if you wanted to be anonymous starting out, but if there's ever legal trouble in the future, we're going to find out who you are.
Yeah, just take some more digging. Right?
Yeah, I think the biggest issue is that, for a court to actually even accept it, you have to be able to show intent, right? And when your example, James, is a little different when you say somebody got injured and they make a claim that the injury is caused by the owner of the property, whether that's a trust or an LLC or a private individual. But if somebody says there's financial fraud, and you have to prove intent before a court says, yeah, okay, we're not going to pull the trust or the LLC and take the whole corporate veil apart just because you make a claim, that's a little tricky.
Yeah. Let's see. Anything else on that? All right, let's jump to the next one. From Boston 25 News via Yahoo News. New Hampshire real estate developer indicted for $3.8 million loan fraud, feds say. Developer allegedly inflated a property value and used fake documents to secure a multi-million-dollar loan. Let's see. I guess it actually sold for $2.7 million, but this guy doctored up all these documents claiming that it was $4.7 million. And then he got caught. So he's facing 30 years in prison and $1 million fine, sounds like.
During the high times of the market, when the market was going up really rapidly, I know of at least one really pretty big case in Indianapolis where investors heard in the media every place that investing in real estate is the thing you need to do. And people basically doctored up pictures of properties where the actual piece of land was empty or burned down or, not even zoned properly. And people threw in hundreds of thousands of dollars to secure these properties because there was an urgency, artificially generated urgency, that you needed to get into the deal. This looks a little bit more like, I don't know what that's called, Tim, but paper fraud, so to speak, where you basically changing the documents instead of actually fraudulently claiming that you have something that you don't have.
Yeah, it's fraud in the facts, or it could be fraud in the inducement to secure funding or investment. Straight up fraud.
I think that's still so possible, but real estate takes a while to evolve. I guess we're not going to all be doing title on blockchain anytime soon, I don't think.
Yeah. It's heading there, but
I mean, in a way, one thing I can say is for anybody involved in any kind of real estate that has a residential component, the old rule to say when the numbers get interesting enough, you want to actually go there and touch it. I think that is still true. And, these things where somebody is playing with documents, or we talked about the LA thing where you're not even involved yourself because you want to stay private in deals like that, that is always, or can be, opening the door to all kinds of fraudsters and fraudulent activities, right? Every property that I own, I flew there and looked at it, and that it was what it said it was.
Yep, that's smart. I've got an investor the same way. He's lives on the East Coast. We're looking at some stuff in Colorado. He's like, I gotta fly out and see it.
Yeah, you should.
Yeah. Like I can go walk it and share, and he trusts me, but he's like, he needs to and should really
Well, and that's actually a good argument to build a good network over time.
Yeah,
I'm pretty proud to say I have so many trusting and good, friendly relationships to so many people across the country that oftentimes there's somebody with a 50 or 100 miles away that I can say, hey, can you go by there, even if I don't do it, or on behalf of one of our clients. Now that also comes with the client network. They have family all over the place and stuff, right? But somebody you trust to go there and say, yes, it is what it says it is.
Yeah. At least for the initial pass, right?
Yeah,
like my buddy, I'm sure he'd have me go look at the property and then just come out after I took a first pass, So, well, hey, let's take a break and hear from our next partner.
Are you looking to elevate your business through exceptional content? Universe Media Publishing is your gateway to success. We understand that in the world of business, content is king, but not just any content. Your business deserves content that captivates, convinces, and converts your audience into clients. At Universe Media Publishing, we specialize in crafting SEO-rich web content, persuasive copywriting, and marketing copy that resonates with your audience. We don't just write, we engage, we connect, and we deliver results. Imagine your brand's voice amplified, your message crystal clear, and your presence dominating the digital landscape. That's the power of partnering with Universe Media Publishing. Don't let your business just blend in. Stand out, be heard, and make an impact. Connect with us at Universe Media Publishing, and let's turn your vision into reality. Visit universemediapublishing.com today. Your story, our expertise. Together, we'll create magic.
Okay, we're back from Fox News via Yahoo News. FBI raids Hollywood mansion in $17.4 million alleged mortgage scam targeting seniors. 11 arrested, including Iranian or Iranian, however you want to say it. The bad guys, right?
Call it Persian.
Topic centered around like money laundering and fraud. Like, I don't think we have any experience with that.
Yeah. Well, I mean, the thing I can say is, and Tim might actually add to that, this whole idea of identity protection and cybersecurity is a field. If I look at my mom, she is 86 now. This goes totally over her head. And I know, especially in California, a lot of retirees have basically no chance anymore to ever change their residence because the prices of the properties have gone up tremendously. So you could never move. So they live 20, 30, 40, 50 years in the same property. So if somebody gets the information of your identity and you have oftentimes hundreds of thousands of dollars of equity sitting in the property, and you wouldn't even know it, right? So that's the way I read this. That's probably how they actually try to pull it off. And this is a continuing battle with identity. I mean, I'm actually quite happy, Tim might not like it, but that you can do online identity verification now. And I think this will become the norm, that for almost any transaction you have to go through this online verification. It would make it harder for these guys to pull it off. Because the whole intention is somebody is 30 years in a property, they bought it for 200,000, it's now 3 million, right? And they're basically trying to get at the equity.
Yeah. I guess it was called Operation Hard Money, which I was like, wait, hard money? How's this involved? Like, think of hard money as fix and flip, So I dug a little bit into it. Apparently they were taking their identity, using that equity in the house to get hard money loans.
Even if you were to get even regular loans, if you can convince a bank that you are the person you claim to be and you have an asset that has hundreds of thousands of equity in it, right? The real onus is, okay, we need to not just have closing at the title, but when you do loans, get a second loan or something like that, second mortgage on an existing property. It used to be relatively easy because you walk in the bank, your bank of trust, and do it personally. But now everything is online. And if there's no ID verification, it is possible, and it doesn't say, I didn't see anything that it said that the owners ever really got asked to pay for anything. It was just getting money and not make the payments for the people who got the money, right? And then when the owners got notified, they could prove that they didn't ask for a loan, right? And the bank couldn't actually say, well, we have any identification other than this number and this number and this address that we got provided, right? So now they do face identification with notary online and stuff like that.
Yeah, our clients are really big into the identity question because, you know, they deal with so many people, especially even with renters or people who apply to be a renter at a property. So using technology, AI even, to be able to verify identification is actually a very big topic of interest for a lot of our clients. And they're actually, you know, trying to implement certain things within their policy in this regard, because there are laws, there are certain, you know, statutes that apply that you have to be mindful of so that you can protect the identity that you are getting from the people of interest. And so, but yes, this is absolutely something that, and really, I think it's necessary. I think Dr. Alex mentioned it. I would agree with that. It is necessary because of stories like this, quite frankly.
Yeah, there's actually, I mean, in a way, it's kind of like why I mentioned cybersecurity. I recall this from my military time in the Air Force. We were always trying to have the more sophisticated electronic suite versus the potential enemy's electronic suite. And that went back and forth. Sometimes we were more sophisticated, sometimes they were more sophisticated, right? And in a way, this is taking advantage of systems that have not advanced enough. And I think we can all say, you know, I mentioned this a little while ago, in almost every other language, real estate is called something like immobiliaria or Immobilien for our German friends, right, James? So it basically it's not mobile. And I think the whole industry is not known for being particularly fast in adopting technology. And so these fraudsters kind of look at, okay, where's their hole that we can kind of invade into and take advantage of until they get caught.
Yeah, it happened. Not to shift gears too much, but it happens in the rental business quite a bit with large apartments, especially. A variety of, you know, fraudulent attempts of even in the military. Dr. Alex, we've had clients who receive, you know, fake orders to transfer, you know. And so being able to identify the legitimacy of those things is just an ongoing issue. A lot of the associations that I'm a part of, identity is always one of the topics that we want to talk about, identity fraud. So I think the real estate, at least here in Florida, the real estate business itself, and especially in the rental business, this is more and more of a topic that they're trying to resolve with the use of technology.
Yeah, I agree with you, Tim. One of the issues, and I hear this from my property management organizations, is that you have to try to find a balance between invasion of privacy, so to speak, and the need to have proper data, right? Like if you go and say, okay, we want to collect social security numbers, you know, because you have evidence of fraud. I mean, I have to say it because, I mean, this might make it a little political, but I was completely shocked when they had an interview, I think 6 months ago, with Elon Musk asking him, how was this in this Doge thing? And he basically revealed that the whole social security database is full of fraud, like 300-year-old people and stuff like that. And one of the things, you know, that you're asking yourself as an investor, okay, so property management checks social security number, but what happens if it's fake? They run it against the database. The database says, yes, this person exists and is alive, right? And then you look at the data and you find out this person is 220 years old. Or the other thing I thought was crazy is there were people in the social security database that haven't even been born yet, officially in the database. And the whole spiel was not so much real estate related, was more like people use government, any kind of government systems where they can apply for money. And the check mark is, are you eligible or not, is always, do you have a valid social security number? So if that database is fraudulent, then all the thing that cascades down from it is fraudulent, which for me as an investor or for our investor clientele, we constantly in a communication with property management to say, what can we do to increase the likelihood that we don't have a fraudulent application? And you ultimately have less and less ways to do it without really getting personal.
Yep, it's such a fine line. We're dealing with that with traffic cameras here in Denver. People are like, where do we draw the line, between getting some good data that helps fight crime versus losing our anonymity or whatever. Yeah. So, well, let's jump to our final fun news item from Science Alert. Giant study may have found the ideal amount of coffee to lower stress. It says 2 to 3 cups of coffee may lower stress, while too much increases it.
Yeah, I'm all for it because I'm invested in a coffee farm in Panama. So the more, the better.
Yeah. Who cares if they get anxiety? Keep drinking, right?
Yeah, there's actually, I find it for you guys. There is a really cool little book about somebody wrote calling it a book is actually a little bit over the top, but he wrote a little book about his experience of kind of weaning himself off of coffee. I thought that was kind of cool.
I'm going to have my 2 to 3. I'm sorry. Go ahead, Meg.
No, I was just going to say I've done cleanses before where I don't drink coffee. And every time I do, I'm like, why am I doing this? This is like, it totally affects my emotional state completely. And then I'm like, there's no reason to get off of it because everywhere in the world and anywhere you can go, you can always get a cup of coffee. So I just don't really see, I think it's a brilliant part of life. It's one of my favorite things. I just try not, I think over 2 cups in the morning. I don't do more than 2 and I make sure they're in the morning and I think it's great.
Yeah,
like
same.
The only sort of, drug that's, it's like my vice. So I'm like, okay with it, I guess.
I've tried the mushroom coffee, but it doesn't seem to have the same joy
No,
that black coffee does to me.
I try to do the mold free and everything. Do you know if your farm's mold free, Axel?
Yeah, absolutely. It's all organic and hand dried and fermented and all the, it's, that's why I said it, right? Like I can actually say, not just because of the investment, when you really kind of upgrade to better beans, it's pretty amazing how different coffee can taste when you not so much go for quantity, but go for quality.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah, I put the thing for the book into the chat.
Yeah, Caffeine by Michael Pollan, Pollan.
Right.
I'll have to check that out. It's funny because I have had some really good cups of coffee. Actually, a couple things. So when I went to Australia and New Zealand, they had flat whites, and I was like, "What is this?" I'd never even heard of it, and I was hooked. Like every day, I was having these flat whites. They were so good. And then I came back to the U.S., and like the next week, Starbucks rolled out their flat whites. I was like, "Oh my god!" All right, I'm going to be spending money at Starbucks. But then I went and I had a flat white at Starbucks, and I was so disappointed. It was, as you might expect, bitter, and just it was not the same.
Yeah,
I actually have to ask you, James, if I may ask you, I mean, you said you spent a little bit of time in Germany. When I remember when I came over with the Air Force to fly for the US Air Force and first ordered a coffee, my first reaction was, that is the one bean that swam through 100 gallons of water or something like that in comparison. Did you feel like when you came to Germany, it was like complete hit because it's so much stronger than the US regular coffee?
Yeah, I don't even know if I drink
coffee in general is just a lot stronger, like Lavazza or,
Right. Yeah.
It's just stronger in general. But now coffee's gotten so amazing, like all these sort of hipster coffee shops. Like it's so much better than, like I think my parents like drank Folgers when I was growing up, and it's just
that was a choice, right? Folgers or Maxwell House. But one thing maybe I can do a little plug, and it has nothing to do with me. I'm an investor myself, but I think it is actually one of the more interesting things when you're talking about real estate investing is to consider agricultural real estate, right? Like coffee farm, cacao farm, teak farms, and stuff like that. in the overall theme of not putting your eggs all in the same basket, right? That's a form of real estate that can get you into international investments as well. And if run properly, it could be actually quite fun. The thing that I appreciated a lot beside the investment is that we getting, as owners, we get invited once a year. I'm not going every year, but there are worse things than going to Belize and checking out some coffee, or going to Panama and checking out some cacao, and also stay around and have a good time.
I love that. Yeah, that's interesting. Very cool. Well, guys, that covers the news portion of the show for this month. I'd like to thank our sponsors, United States Real Estate Investor Advertising, Real Expert Talks, and Universe Media Publishing. And of course, thanks to our guests today. You guys were awesome. Why don't you let people know how they can connect with you? Let's start with Tim.
Yeah. Probably the easiest way is to go to our website, which is PM, as in property management, lawsolutions.com. You can also find me on LinkedIn and the other social media, but LinkedIn is a good way to contact me as well, Tim Baldwin. And I'd love to hear from you. Thanks for the invite, James. I appreciate it.
Yes, it was great. Thanks. Axel?
Yeah, so easiest way is ideawealthgrower.com. You can land at the homepage. At the top right-hand corner is a button that says Discovery Call, and we can talk. Or you put my name or Idea Wealth Grower in Google, and it comes up all over every platform.
Okay, idealwealthgrower.com.
Right.
Cool. All right, Meg.
I think just our website, CA South Development, and and I answer my LinkedIn messages as well, Meg Obal on LinkedIn. And then for the specific properties that you can own and cash flow, or, put opportunity zone funds or 1031 funds into, that's called Live Modernist. So we're all
Fantastic.
Yeah.
All right. Thanks, guys. Again, I'm your host, James Brown. Feel free to connect with me about partnering or coaching by going to jamesbrownrealestate.com/connect. And don't forget, if you're an investor looking to connect with an investor-focused agent in your market, just email me directly for now. Go to james@jamesbrownrealestate.com. Also, huge thanks to our founder and producer, Antonio Holman with United States Real Estate Investor. Follow and subscribe to This Month in Real Estate Investing at thismonthinrealestateinvesting.com or your favorite podcast app. And if you run across any interesting news, events, or have suggestions for expert guests like we had today, feel free to share by emailing Antonio at UnitedStatesRealEstateInvestor.com. And remember, when one door closes, another door opens to financial freedom. See you next month.